Of course, by the time they passed, my mother died in '98, my father died in 2000. They had seen lots of progress. But back in the day, you had no option for where you lived in the South. You lived in the ghetto. You never, and white folks could live in the black neighborhoods, but blacks couldn't live in the white neighborhoods. And there are parts of Jacksonville that I can see now that I wasn't allowed in when I was growing up there. And so they saw this, and I'm sure like my father, 3 years before he retired, he saw the union opening up to blacks who had the skills and had to always train the white kids who now were their bosses once they trained them. But there was never any hate in their hearts. My parents just never hated. They were never angry. My mother did day labor. She could cook and clean and take care of the white kids in the home, but she couldn't live in the neighborhood, you know. And then once my youngest sister went to elementary school, that is when she started working. And later in her life, she got to be a custodian on the school janitorial staff. And so she was cleaning a white high school. And she knew I was interested in science, and I'd come on. See, my mother always, even though she didn't understand my answers to the question after I got past middle school, she always asked, "What'd you learn today?" Now, she didn't understand my answer, but she probably understood bullshit. So I couldn't tell her just some stuff that didn't make sense, okay? So I always had to tell her what I learned that day, because it was not permissible for me to be away from home all day in school and not learn anything. So she was cleaning the science labs at this white high school, Andrew Jackson High School. Andrew Jackson, imagine a name like that in the South. And she would come home and tell me about how well equipped the labs were. Well, at the time I was taking chemistry, and our chemistry lab had a Bunsen burner and a beaker. So the teacher had to demonstrate experiments. We could never experiment ourselves because we didn't have enough equipment to do so. And so they saw over time how things were getting better. But by the time I left home in 1959, things were still segregated. There were no white folks in any capacity on my university campus. It was a state university, but it was all black, staff, students, everything. So when I went back to campus years later, it was strange to see white kids walking across this campus. Man, where you guys come from? What are you doing here? And so, and like my freshman year, we boycotted the bus company because that back of the bus stuff, because they arrested a lady because she dared sit in the front of the bus because the back was crowded and she was tired. She was coming from white neighborhood cleaning some white folks' house, and she had to stand in the back. And so the bus driver told her to get up and go back to the back, and she refused. So he pulled over, called the cops. Cops came and took her off the bus and arrested her. That word got to the campus, and the president of the Student Body Association called an assembly. So we showed up standing room only in Lee Hall Auditorium, which is the biggest auditorium on campus. And we decided, no, this ain't happening. We're gonna run this bus company out of business. So everybody on campus who had a car drove the bus routes and picked up every black person they saw standing waiting for the bus. And we decided we weren't getting on the bus. And there was a lot of student traffic across town because, you know, most of us didn't have cars. So we just stopped riding the bus. In fact, I didn't ride a city bus again until I was out here in LA, years later. Anyway, over that summer, the bus company went out of business. And when they decided to start bus service again in Jackson, in Tallahassee, people could sit wherever there was a seat. So I was a part of all that activism. So my parents saw that kind of change happening during their lifetime. Of course, they were there when Emmett Till was killed, and he was killed because somebody said he whistled at a white woman or something, so they killed him, you know. And when I was in college, 4 white guys decided they wanted to rape some black girls, so they came on our campus, or came to a spot near the campus and took this one girl and raped her, and went home and bragged about it. And they never served a day in jail. In fact, one of the wives of one of the guys says she ought to be proud that some white guy wanted her, you know, that kind of crap. So all that stuff was going on while I was a college student. And so it was easy for me to leave Florida and come to California to work. But then when I got to California, I experienced much more subtle discrimination. Evicted from my first hotel after 10 days or so. evicted from the first, couldn't find an apartment, so ended up in a rooming house. Then he got evicted from the house once the landlord found out I was in there with the 3 white guys. And refused service in restaurants, that kind of stuff. So it was just not spoken. There were no signs, but the treatment was not a lot different. And I'm 19, 20 years old, and it's hard to adjust when you're really just a child, because like I said, the age of consent was 21 back in the day. So it was challenging, but because I didn't hate, I wasn't angry, I just dealt with the circumstance. Okay, but when I walked through the doors of NASA, man, the whole world changed. Because the CEO, who was probably the best leader I've ever experienced or observed, didn't care what color the package was that the talent came in. You can help us land a man on the moon? Come on in, my brother. And he would not tolerate discrimination in the building. There was one guy in the hangar, the aircraft mechanics and technicians worked in the hangar. There was one guy who looked black because he was dark complected, but he was Puerto Rican. And they treated him as if he were black. And he became distracted by that treatment, became very bitter, and ended up losing his job because he just stopped working and started complaining. He just started working, stopped working and started complaining. So when the CEO heard about this, he said, no, that ain't happening. So we're going to find the right person to integrate the hangar. So he recruited a guy who was ready for retirement from the Air Force. And he was the right temperament. He was seriously talented. And he wasn't going to get mad and punch somebody in the face. He was a big guy, too, so if he wanted to whoop some butt, he very well could have. But he came in. They respected his talent over time. They knew they didn't have to fear him. And over time, we started to add more color to the hangar. And it was a very smooth transition, but our CEO was one who insisted that we give everybody a fair shot. And so he was the one who formed the first EEO committee, Equal Employment Opportunity Committee, and I chaired it for the first 10 years of its life. And I was around when they coined affirmative action, and it was never about quotas. It was never about lowered standards. It was about us doing something affirmative to make sure everybody knew that the door was open to them. And so he looked around, all of our engineers were white and male. There were 2 exceptions. Me and my man Harold Washington, we were the only 2 black engineers. And we were both very good, I have to say. And Harold was brilliant, and I was semi-brilliant. And so he said, there must be other folks that look like you who are as good as you are. So we looked at where we were recruiting, and we were recruiting at the places where we weren't likely to find any color or any gender differences, because we didn't have any women either. And so we started recruiting at Hispanic serving institutions like New Mexico State, places like that, and we started recruiting at historically black colleges and universities, and all of a sudden, we started looking like the country that we were serving. And so, but he did that stuff on his own. Nobody made him do that. He just decided, hey man, we need the best talent we have if we're gonna keep Kennedy from being a liar about landing a man on the moon. And so he went out and looked for him in places where we were likely to find them. So that's the environment I had at work. And so that gave me all the energy I needed to deal with the crap I faced when I got back to town. But like I said, the foundation on which I was able to build my life, I give the credit to my parents, because they helped us build that foundation. It was solid as a rock, absolutely solid. So here I stand almost 79 years old, and I ain't mad at nobody. I don't hate nobody, man. And if you mistreat me, that's on you. It ain't about me. Because if you get to know me, you know I'm worthy of respect. If you don't know me, you don't take time to get to know me, that's your problem, not mine.